Traveling through the Ming Dynasty, he became the carpenter emperor Zhu Youxiao. Since I have arrived at Daming, I have an obligation to let Daming shine all over the world, for eternity. Emperor Xiong Tingbi killed a rebellious dragon in the East China Sea and specially paid tribute to the Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball. Zhu Youxiao. Omega. Non-normal historical texts, please do not take them too seriously. Force is just a accompaniment, with intellectual combat as the main focus. Keywords of the novel. Check in at the end of the Mythical Ming Dynasty without pop-ups, check in at the end of the Mythical Ming Dynasty TXT Complete Collection download, check in at the latest chapter of the Mythical Ming Dynasty reading. Chapter 1. Mythology in the Late Ming Dynasty. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Mythology in the Late Ming Dynasty. Emperor, Lord Xiong Tingbi has presented a dragon ball as a tribute. Take it. A young man wearing a yellow robe embroidered with dragon patterns waved his hand. Looking at the vast white snow in the distance, Cao Yi felt a sense of confusion in his heart. It had been a month since he traveled through it, and he had gained a good understanding of the world. However, the more he learned, the colder Cao Yi's heart became. He traveled through time, and that's it, but unfortunately he became Zhu Youxiao, the famous short-lived emperor of the Ming Dynasty. The carpenter emperor Zhu Youxiao. Originally, I traveled through Zhu Yu school, and Cao Yi didn't think there was anything bad about it. Although it was the end of the Ming Dynasty, at least I was also the emperor. I am the emperor of the country. After a few days of initial panic, Cao Yi also accepted the fact that he had become Zhu Youxiao. Although he was a short-lived emperor, he was a great traveler with all the knowledge and foresight of later generations. With the foresight of history, it was not easy to change his destiny against the heavens. If he could still be deprived of power by eunuchs in the Donglin party, he might as well learn from his younger brother, Emperor Chongzhen, and find a crooked neck tree to hang his own southeast branch. But a few days later, Zhu Youxiao realized that he had thought too much, and the world was not as simple as he thought. The world has changed, even he dare not recognize it. Around the middle of the southern Song dynasty, history took a big turn. On the Mongolian grasslands, hundreds of huge cracks suddenly opened up in the sky, and endless spiritual energy gushed out from the cracks. Then the world began to grow bigger. Although Zhu Youxiao didn't know how much bigger it was, according to the information he currently had, it was at least 10 times larger. Moreover, the explosion of spiritual energy brought the whole world into the era of cultivation, and the first beneficiaries were the Mongolians. The Mongol Iron Cavalry conquered the world, and the second beneficiary was the Southern Song dynasty. Relying on advanced civilization, the Southern Song dynasty also came from behind. Even though the Mongol Iron Cavalry was invincible, in order to eliminate the Southern Song dynasty, the renowned Mongol Iron Cavalry was almost killed or injured. They occupied the Central Plains for less than 100 years before being driven back to the grasslands. Their ancestor Zhu Yuanzhang took advantage of the situation and established the Ming Empire, which has been more than 2,500 years. Now the sun is also setting in the west. Your Majesty, it has been a month since you went to court, and the ministers are discussing it one after another. Wei Zhongxian cautiously said that since the emperor recovered from his illness a month ago, he seems to have changed a person. The cultivation that he didn't care about has now become extremely enthusiastic, and he hasn't even touched the woodworking work that he was once obsessed with for nearly a month. If he didn't know that the emperor has qi to protect his body, he wouldn't have been taken away. He would have doubted whether Zhu Youxiao had been taken away. Taking a glance at Wei Zhongxian, Zhu Youxiao couldn't help but sigh. If crossing to the end of the Ming dynasty was a hellish start, then he was an abyssal start, an unfathomable kind. If it were a normal late Ming dynasty, then he could still release Wei Zhongxian and bite people. In this world now. He dares to release Wei Zhongxian and bite people today, and tomorrow those people dare to dismantle Wei Zhongxian and send him back with a different soul. Nowadays, the Jin Wei and Dong Chang are like dogs tied up in cages, with no deterrent effect at all. I understand now. Order me to go ahead and attend the morning court tomorrow. Zhu Youxiao waved his hand. Although he knew that the previous court wouldn't change much, he still wanted to struggle. His cultivation talent was quite touching, and he forced himself to cultivate for a month. With the help of a large number of heavenly and earthly treasures, he barely sensed spiritual energy. In his lifetime, he could only reach the level of a 6th or 7th grade martial artist. The cultivators of the Ming Dynasty were divided into martial artists and literati, with similar levels, with 9th to 7th grades being lower grades, the 6th to 4th grades are considered as middle grades, the 3rd to 1st grades are considered as top grades, and above the 1st grade, the martial arts are considered as the martial master and martial saint, while the literati are considered as the Asian saint and the most holy. With his qualifications, if he wants to change his destiny by personal force, there is no need to think about it. Perhaps there is still some hope through political means. The next day, before midnight, the sky was still dim, and all the civil and military ministers outside Fengtian Gate were already standing in the cold wind waiting, making a clear distinction. No one was noisy, no one was whispering, everyone stood motionless, only the cold wind whistling. Although the weather is cold and the earth is frozen, for the ministers, this coldness does not have much impact. Those who can ascend to the court are at least 5th grade strong individuals, without 5th grade cultivation and even without the qualification to go to court. As the sun slowly rose from the clouds and the bells and drums outside the Meridian Gate rang out, a messenger strode to the entrance of the main hall and said in a loud voice to the civil and military ministers in the cold wind, "Xian." Upon hearing the voice of the attendant, various civil and military officials lined up one after another, entering from the Yemen on either side of the Meridian Gate, crossing the Jinshui Bridge, and entering the Hall of Supreme Harmony. They were ranked on both sides according to their civil and military ranks. The leader of civil officials is Louis Gouet, the first deputy bachelor of the cabinet, and the leader of military officials is British Duke Zhang Weixian. Zhu Youxiao walked slowly to the dragon chair, and all the civil and military officials bowed and saluted, "Long live my emperor, long live, long live." All the beloved ministers are flat. Zhu Youxiao supported his hands weakly, and was not surprised that he only bowed to civil and military officials instead of kneeling. This is a world where his personal strength is concentrated, and being able to bow is already a highly respected thing. If he wants a group of strong people who can go up to the sky and into the sea to kneel and bow, even the once invincible Mongolian Khan, Genghis Khan, dared not do so. "Your Majesty, thank you." The civil and military officials shouted out loud and then stood up straight. "I have something to announce." Wang Onlang, who was accompanying him, sang loudly, while Zhu Youxiao sat directly on the dragon chair. Just as Zhu Youxiao sat on the dragon chair, a mechanical sound echoed through his mind. Detected that the host's current location meets the check.in criteria. System is currently being activated, activation successful, the host can sign in today. System. Zhu Youxiao's pupils shrank and his heart suddenly shook. However, he quickly calmed down because in the Forbidden City, he had the protection of the 9 Dragon Town Yun formation, and no one had the ability to directly transmit words into his mind. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't do it unless he first broke through the 9 Dragon Town Yun formation that enveloped the entire capital. This is also why, even if his temperament changed greatly after crossing over, no one doubted him. Must be here to sign in. Zhu Youxiao had a sudden thought and tentatively asked in his mind. "You can sign in at any place where your luck gathers." Once a day the mechanical and indifferent voice rang out again, and then fell completely silent. No matter how much Zhu Youxiao asked, the voice never appeared again. A flash of thought flashed in Zhu Youxiao's mind, and he roughly knew that the reason why this system was activated was because he sat on this dragon chair, representing the great fortune of the Ming Dynasty. Zhu Youxiao's thoughts were myriad, and a glimmer of hope couldn't help but rise in his heart. Originally, he had almost given up on his fate. In this mythological world of the late Ming Dynasty, with his current abilities, he had no chance to change his fate against the heavens. However, the emergence of the system gave Zhu Youxiao a glimmer of hope. System, sign in. Zhu Youxiao withdrew his divergent thinking and silently recited in his heart. Congratulations to the host, successful check.in, obtaining the small divine power. Incarnation of flesh and blood. The mechanical and indifferent sound of the system rang out again. Countless knowledge about the incarnation of flesh and blood instantly rushed into Zhu Youxiao's mind, allowing him to completely understand this little magic in just a few breaths. The flesh and blood incarnation is similar to the external incarnation of a great divine power, with the only difference being that the external incarnation is based on heavenly materials and earthly treasures, with limited potential. On the other hand, the flesh and blood incarnation is derived from its own flesh and blood to become a clone, with greater potential. However, as a small divine power, the stronger the divine power, the greater the potential. The biggest downside is that the incarnation of flesh and blood is derived from one's own flesh and blood, and once it falls into the hands of the enemy, it can easily become a medium for curse. Seeing this flaw, Zhu Youxiao couldn't help but laugh. He carried the fortune of the entire Ming Dynasty, and cursing him was equivalent to cursing the entire Ming Dynasty. Even the strong saints had to be backfired and fallen. Secondly, nurturing a flesh and blood incarnation will extract a portion of his soul essence. Once the flesh and blood incarnation falls, his essence will also be severely damaged. Old ties, please recommend and collect, end of this chapter. Chapter 2. Dangerous Situations. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Dangerous Situations Cabinet Duty Room, Lu Yijing's classroom. Lu Yijing is chatting with Han Kuang, who is also a Grand Secretary of the Cabinet. Lu Gong, those people are too extreme. Are they trying to cover up the sky with their own hands? Han Kuang complained with an unpleasant expression on his face. You are not unaware of those people, either this or that. Even those of us who are close to him may not consider us as our own. Regarding Han Kuang's complaints, Lu Yijing only spoke lightly. Although he and Han Kuang also had the reputation of the Donglin party, they were not from Donglin Academy or children of southern gentry. In the Donglin party, they had always been marginalized figures and were excluded by others, so they had a good personal relationship. But they're trying to force us to resign. Han Kuang was unwilling. Why did they climb to the position of the cabinet? They didn't have to go through all the obstacles and put in all their efforts. Why should they compromise with those people? Unable to fight, it's better to take a step back and broaden the horizon than to tear open your face and make your head bleed. Lu Yijing remained indifferent. He had already anticipated this situation. The Donglin party had worked tirelessly to bring down Fang Zongzhe, the former head assistant, not to make him rise to power. Their goal was to make Yi Xianggao sit in the position of head assistant. Moreover, he and Han Kuang were only second-grade literati. Yi Xianggao was a first-class scholar, and he was the kind of first-class scholar who was only one step away from the half-saint. His strength and influence were not comparable to those of people, and it was useless to be unwilling. If he were to be the head assistant for decades, he might have broken through to the first grade and have the ability to compete with Yi Xianggao. Unfortunately, they would not give him the chance to do so. He has this opportunity. Lu Gong, can we just watch them cover the sky with their own hands? This family's dominance is not the blessing of the Ming Dynasty. Seeing that Lu Yijing was not moved, Han Kuang sighed. Those self-proclaimed members of the Donglin party had already occupied 1/3 of the position in the court. If they were to take down Lu Yijing's position as the head minister of the cabinet and his position as the grand secretary of the cabinet, they would occupy half of the country in the court, and the balance in the court would be disrupted, causing an imbalance of power. For the Ming Dynasty, it would be a disaster rather than a blessing. Fang Zongzhe and his team were aware of this issue, but they still withdrew. Lu Yijing remained expressionless. The Donglin party was strong, while the military group was weak and conservative. The others were scattered, and there were many who were wise and protected themselves. Moreover, in the eyes of others, this was just an internal dispute within the Donglin party, and no one was willing to force the Donglin party for their sake. Sigh. Han Kuang sighed again and said, "Since Lu Gong doesn't want to resist either, I'll go back and write a resignation." As he walked to the door, Han Kuang suddenly said, "It's better to retreat. If we win against those people, we may not have a good end either." After speaking, Han Kuang left the classroom without looking back. As he watched Han Kuang leave, Lu Yijing smiled bitterly and shook his head. The underlying meaning of Han Kuang's words was unclear to him. He could only say that the emperor of the old Zhu family was really incompetent. In order to save the Ming dynasty and persist in reform, Zhang Juzheng did not hesitate to offend the ministers of the Manchu dynasty. However, shortly after Zhang Juzheng's death, Emperor Wanli ordered the Zhang family to be copied, stripped of their palace ranks, and forced to seize the seals and books given to him during his lifetime. As the 4 generations decreed, the wall was overturned and everyone pushed against him. Moreover, Zhang Juzheng offended the ministers of the Manchu dynasty for reform, resulting in the death of his children and grandchildren, and exile. Fang, even myself narrowly escaped being decapitated and whipped to death. The noble family of Yasheng suffered a complete breakdown overnight. How many people are willing to be loyal to the emperor? On the other side, facing downwards, Zhu Youxiao immediately entered his own woodworking workshop in the imperial supervision, and no one was allowed to enter. Looking at the wood, knives, chisels in a room, Zhu couldn't help but have a big head. He's not the real carpenter emperor, why do you need these things? After thinking about it, Zhu Youxiao still hasn't lost these things. He needs some time to practice next. The civil and military officials of the Manchu dynasty also like to pry into the emperor's privacy. Instead of being mysterious and attracting attention, it's better to keep these things to cover up. Anyway, everyone knows that Emperor Tianqi is addicted to woodworking, which happens to be used to cover up his own cultivation. After finding a clean place, Zhu Youxiao activated his flesh and blood incarnation power. Suddenly, Zhu Youxiao felt a strange wave emerging from the underworld, circulating continuously in his body as if analyzing something, gradually shrinking, and finally condensing into a small cocoon of light in his heart. At the moment of seeing Xiaoguang's cocoon, Zhu Youxiao naturally knew that this was his flesh and blood incarnation, but it would take 3 months to conceive successfully. I'm pregnant now. Looking at Xiaoguang cocoon, Zhu Youxiao suddenly felt that his whole person was not doing well. After daydreaming for a while, Zhu Youxiao put aside his divergent thinking. Although the world he traveled to was not the end of the Ming dynasty in his original world, Zhu Youxiao knew that his situation was much more dangerous than that of the Tianqi Emperor in the original world. At least the Tianqi Emperor in the original world had ears, eyes, and swords like the Dongchang Jinyui, and he. Now the Dongchang and Jinyui are useless dogs without claws and teeth. His emperor is just a puppet, purely a decoration. The Donglin party of southern gentry, as well as the Chu party, Zhejiang party, Qi party, the Li family in Liaodong, the Wushuan group, and various political parties, big and small, are like this. The Crucian carp crossing the river is comparable to the feudal period at the end of the Tang dynasty. If it weren't for the lack of leaders in the current court, everyone would need a judge. This emperor would have been gone long ago. The most crucial thing is that there seems to be an invisible trend in this world pushing the whole world closer to the Ming dynasty of his previous life. For example, his chief Laozi died shortly after he ascended to power from the elixir, and Emperor Wuzong also died in drowning. Zhu Youxiao has a premonition that if he cannot change his life against the heavens, he may not be able to escape the fate of drowning. The next morning. Set up the Temple of Heaven. Zhu Youxiao instructed Wei Zhongxian, who was waiting at the door, that although Wei Zhongxian had already taken over the position of eunuch Bingbai, it was regrettable that he, as an emperor, was a puppet and had almost deprived him of his most important right to criticize the emperor. Cabinet proposals could be implemented without his consent, so this eunuch Bingbai was simply a name and still did the job of serving people. Why did the emperor go to the Temple of Heaven this early morning? Wei Zhongxian was taken aback for a moment, but his decades of professional skills in serving others still made him quickly react and say, "I will obey you." After a moment of response, Wei Zhongxian hastily arranged it. Compared to the Forbidden City in the past life, the Forbidden City in this world is several times larger. The Temple of Heaven in the past life is outside the Imperial Palace, while the Temple of Heaven in this world is inside the Imperial Palace. However, the location of the Temple of Heaven is the outer palace, and behind the Fengtian Gate is the inner palace. As a place for the Emperor's heaven sacrifice ceremony, the position of the Temple of Heaven is self-evident, which is also the reason why Zhu Youxiao came here. Even the Qianqing Palace where he resides does not have the qualification to sign in, so other places should not be able to do so. In the entire Imperial Palace, only the Temple of Heaven, which is used for the heaven sacrifice ceremony, and the Imperial Temple, which is used as the Zhu family temple, may be used for signing in. You guys are guarding here. After giving a command, Zhu Youxiao walked into the Temple of Heaven alone. As he walked straight to the high platform of the heaven worship ceremony, Zhu Youxiao silently recited in his heart, "System, sign in." Congratulations to the host, successfully signed in and obtained the 3rd grade treasure armor. Tianyuan gold armor. The mechanical and indifferent sound of the system rang out, and at the same time, Zhu Youxiao clearly felt an additional gray space in his mind, with a domineering golden armor suspended in it. Old ties, please recommend and collect, end of this chapter. Chapter 3. 9 Rank Martial Arts Enlightenment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 9 Rank Martial Arts Enlightenment. Zhu Youxiao had a sudden thought, and a golden armor appeared in his hand. Although it looked like a metal armor, Zhu Youxiao did not feel the weight, but he was very aware of the defensive power of this golden armor. Even if he stood still and did not have top-grade cultivation, he could not break the defense of this golden armor. After surveying the golden armor, Zhu Youxiao threw the Tianyuan golden armor back into the gray space in his mind. Although this golden armor is not bad and is a treasure that can be easily stolen if placed outside, Zhu School is not lacking in treasures of this level. His old Zhu family has produced 2 martial saints, Zhu Yuanzhang and Zhu Di. Although his descendants are not up to par now, there are still many treasures left behind. If it is a 1st-grade treasure or a semi-holy level spiritual artifact, it is still worth his attention. It is only a 3rd-grade treasure, in his opinion, it is still good. At least in his old Zhu family's private treasure trove, there are many treasures of this level. The next day. Set up the Imperial Temple. After serving as the deity's tablet on the dragon chair for the whole morning, Zhu Yu stepped out of the Hall of Supreme Harmony and gave instructions to Wei Zhongxian. Yes, my lord. Wei Zhongxian was taken aback for a moment, but he didn't ask much. He directly bowed down to answer the question and then arranged to proceed. On the sedan chair, Zhu Youxiao fell into contemplation. From the situation of the 2 early dynasties, he also roughly understood the relationships between various forces in the court. At present, the most active party in the court is the Donglin party, occupying nearly half of the imperial positions. The imperial censors of the Ming Dynasty were not just mouthful cannons. A 5th-rank imperial envoy dared to compete with cabinet ministers, with a standard low position and weight. Next is the Zhejiang party. However, since the previous Zhejiang party leader Fang Songzhe was kicked out, the Zhejiang party's momentum has plummeted. Faced with the aggression of the Donglin party, they can only unite with the Qi party and the Chu party to barely maintain the current situation. Next is the Liao party led by the Li family in Liaodong, which is also the only party with military power. Unlike other parties, they can only indirectly control military power through the 5 army commanders' office. Therefore, In order to avoid the Li family in Liaodong from becoming a vassal force in the late Tang dynasty, the officials in the court had a certain understanding and suppressed the officials of the Liao party. Next up is the Wu Suni clan, currently led by the British Duke Zhang Weixian, but also some of the most severely suppressed individuals. Suppressing military officials is almost a consensus among all civil officials in the court. Apart from the lack of balance between civil and military officials, the more important thing is to worry about military officials regaining military power again. In the end, only a few officials with party names were left, but in reality, they were just scattered individuals. For example, his teacher Sun Qingzong, although bearing the name of the Donglin party, was actually more similar to Lu Yijing and Han Kuang. Just because he was close to some Donglin party officials, he was labeled as the Donglin party. In fact, his interest relationship with the Donglin party was not deep, and he belonged to those who were tied up in the car. Emperor, the temple has arrived. Wei Zhongxian, who walked ahead, interrupted Zhu Youxiao's contemplation. Well, you guys are waiting here. After getting off the sedan chair, Zhu Youxiao gave orders and walked into the temple alone. Upon arriving at the tablets of the ancestors, Zhu Youxiao did not immediately sign in, but instead placed incense on each tablet. I pay my respects to the emperor. Just as I finished incense, a hoarse and deep voice sounded from behind Zhu Youxiao. Lu Gonggang, there's no need to be too polite. As soon as Zhu Youxiao turned around, he saw an elderly eunuch kneeling on the ground, so he quickly reached out to help him. Thank you, Emperor. After the eunuch bowed, he quietly walked up to the back of Zhu Youxiao and stood silently. Glancing at Lu Zhong standing behind him, Zhu Youxiao's heart warmed. Lu Zhong was the personal guardian eunuch of his grandfather, Emperor Wanli. Despite his old age, he was actually a second-class warrior who entered the palace at the age of 10 and guarded the Ming royal family for hundreds of years. It was precisely because of the existence of these elderly people that even with the imperial power falling, no one dared to act recklessly, intending to take control of the palace and only dared to secretly bribe palace maids and eunuchs. System, sign in, Zhu Youxiao silently recited in his heart. Congratulations to the host, successful check.in and obtaining the 9th level martial arts enlightenment. The cold and mechanical sound of the system rang out, and at the same time, a large amount of knowledge about the 9th grade warrior instantly rushed into his mind. Zhu Youxiao closed his eyes and silently digested the knowledge in his mind, while Lu Zhong silently stood behind him. I don't know how long it took, but Zhu Youxiao slowly opened his eyes, and a flash of joy flashed in his eyes. He absorbed so much knowledge from 9th grade martial artists, and he was confident that he would break through the 9th grade within 2 months. Hall of Supreme Harmony, Early Dynasty. Watching the civil and military officials arguing in a row, Zhu Youxiao looked expressionlessly without any intention of stopping them. He went to the morning court several times, and each time it was like this, basically from the beginning of the morning court to the end. The situation was more serious, with a combination of punches and kicks. Fortunately, they were all cultivators, so they didn't cause any harm. System, sign in. Zhu Youxiao silently recited in his heart. Congratulations to the host, successful check.in, obtained. Dragon Chi quenched body. The mechanical and indifferent sound of the system rang out. Before Zhu Youxiao could react, a shimmering golden aura instantly appeared in his body and quickly penetrated into his limbs. Zhu Youxiao felt warm all over, as if soaking in a hot spring in winter. The comfortable feeling made Zhu Youxiao drowsy. It took him some time to wake up from his dream, and the golden aura in his body had already disappeared. Instead, there was an indescribable transparency all over his body, and the spiritual energy that was originally only vaguely sensed suddenly became much clearer. Zhu Youxiao was overjoyed in vain, but he didn't expect that this dragon chi quenched body could improve his cultivation talent. His original talent was extremely poor, and he just reached the threshold of cultivation. He had been searching for treasures to improve his cultivation talent before, but unfortunately, nothing was found. Even the private treasure trove of the old Zhu family didn't have such treasures. Unexpectedly, he signed in. After this dragon chi quenched body, his cultivation talent could at least reach an ordinary level, and the time to break through the 9th level martial artist could be greatly advanced. He felt that at most half a month, he would definitely be able to break through. After a moment of ecstasy, Zhu Youxiao suddenly noticed that the entire Hall of Supreme Harmony had quieted down. All the officials, at some point, stopped arguing and looked at him with a curious expression on their faces. Zhu Youxiao was taken aback for a moment, then put away the smile on his face, regained his calm expression, and looked up at Wang An beside him with a glance. Upon receiving Zhu Youxiao's gaze, Wang An shouted loudly, "If you have something to report, leave court if you have nothing to do. I'm sorry to inform you." After the civil and military officials of the Manchu dynasty bowed, they all retreated. Old ties, please recommend and collect. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. The Incarnation of Flesh and Blood. Cao Yi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. The Incarnation of Flesh and Blood. Cao Yi watching the figures of civil and military officials retreating, Zhu Youxiao's face remained unchanged. He was not afraid that those people would notice the changes in his body. The palace was the core of the entire 9 Dragons Xinyan formation, and everyone in the palace would be suppressed. The true element could not operate, and the elemental spirit could not be detached. Even physical divine powers like the heavenly eye and heavenly foot of Buddhism would be suppressed. Therefore, even if he was found to have abnormalities, those people could only rely on guessing, either by obtaining information from the eunuchs around him. Anyone who dares to forcefully break through the suppression of the great formation is rebellious, and there is no reason for it. Time is like water, in the blink of an eye, more than a year has passed. Over the past year, Zhu Youxiao has been responsible for his duties and played a qualified judge in the court. Apart from checking in every day, he has hardly done anything extra in the court, and the relationship between the monarch and his subjects is harmonious. During this period, Zhu Youxiao also visited the entire imperial palace. As he thought, only the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the Temple of Heaven, and the Temple of Supreme Harmony could serve as check-in places. My lord, Lu Yijing has submitted his resignation for the 3rd time and I'm afraid he can't stop it anymore. Behind Zhu Youxiao, a young man with a handsome appearance, elegant temperament, and wearing a white scholar robe spoke out, saying that this was his flesh and blood incarnation. Although the soul was connected between the body and the incarnation, he still preferred this way of communication. Since knowing that he was a puppet emperor, Zhu Youxiao has been nervous and trembling in his work. The eunuchs around him also dare not trust him, and every word they say requires careful consideration. Even eunuchs like Wei Zhongxian, Wang An, and Chen Hong who grew up with him since childhood, Zhu Youxiao cannot believe them. Who knows who they will be, especially after knowing that his cheap father died from taking pills. Zhu Youxiao couldn't believe the eunuchs around him even more. The ruler of a grand country would have died from poison. You should know that this is the end of the Ming Dynasty, not the world where poison could be used as a fairy pill in the previous life. If his cheap father's eunuch was fine, he could have eaten the stone table in front of his eyes. What should we do? The others in the court are all standing idly by, and we have no way to change. Zhu Youxiao shook his head. The Donglin party was so powerful that even other parties did not want to get involved in this matter, and he had no choice. Master, we cannot let the Donglin party continue to expand. The flesh and blood transformed into a cold light in his eyes and spoke coldly. Is it too early to take action now? Our current cultivation level is only 4th grade, why not wait a little longer? Zhu Youxiao frowned. After nearly a year of signing in, although he had already reached the 4th level of cultivation, his body was only in the later stage of the 4th level, and his flesh and blood incarnation was only in the early stage of the 4th level. If he had to fight against the Donglin party, his 4th level cultivation was still a bit lacking. Even though he practiced the Imperial Dao Extreme World Classic inherited by the old Zhu family and was known for his strong combat power, he faced at least several first-level strong individuals, and possibly even sub-holy level strong individuals. In the Donglin party, this cultivation level is far from enough. My lord, now the Donglin party has mastered more than half of the power in the court. With the current gathering of the Donglin party, we are afraid that someone will soon break through the Yasheng. When the Donglin party's momentum is achieved, even if we break through the Wuzuan, we may not be able to turn the tide. Zhu Youxiao closed his eyes and had a myriad of thoughts. Although his current cultivation level was relatively good, he clearly felt some obstacles. From the secret scriptures of the old Zhu family, he also learned a lot of knowledge about cultivation. In addition to relying on talent and resources, cultivation in this world also requires qi luck. The stronger the strength, the more important qi luck becomes, especially at the top level. Once qi luck cannot support cultivation, so his cultivation will come to a standstill, and the qi gathered by him as the emperor can only support him to cultivate to Wuzuan. Even if he can sign in and obtain countless resources, as well as his cultivation experience, he will have to practice for more than 100 years to have the opportunity to become Wuzuan. As for Wusheng, unless he gathers the qi of the entire Ming Dynasty, there is no play. Therefore, when facing 100 officials, the competition is for power and qi. Chen Hong, pass an edict to have Cao Yi supervise the East Factory. After careful consideration, Zhu Youxiao instructed Chen Hong, who was waiting outside the door, that Cao Yi was his original name, and the main reason for choosing this name was to miss the person he was in his previous life. Using his flesh and blood incarnation to confront the Donglin party, Zhu Youxiao had also carefully considered it. Even if his flesh and blood incarnation was defeated, he still had room for relaxation, so as not to be caught in a trap. Chen Hong, who was guarding outside the door, couldn't help but tremble when he heard the name Cao Yi. Cao Yi had only appeared by the emperor's side 7 or 8 months ago, but in just 3 or 4 months, he had taken control of the entire palace. He acted recklessly and with extremely brutal methods, almost washing the entire palace with blood. He implicated thousands of palace maids and eunuchs, and not only did the wet nurse of the Tianqi emperor, Kababa, die in his hands, it is said that even Li Xianqi almost died in his hands. If it weren't for the last moment, the emperor would have said that Li Xianqi was the consort of the late emperor and couldn't have died at the hands of eunuchs. Perhaps Li Xianqi wouldn't have been sent to the cold palace. Yes, my lord. Looking up at the handsome man behind Zhu School, Chen Hong's heart trembled and he quickly lowered his head. This person was simply a natural executioner. Wang An was called to the prison by him and fell ill for more than 2 months after coming out. It seemed that the emperor was planning to release him to harm others. After leaving the Qianqing palace, Chen Hong found himself covered in a thin layer of sweat. When the cold wind blew, he couldn't help but shiver again. It's good if this executioner leaves. Chen Hong patted his chest. Now that Cao Yi is in the palace is completely silent, and he has to be careful even when speaking. Zhu Youxiao appointed a new supervisor of the East Factory, causing a huge uproar throughout the court and the public. Han Prefecture. At this moment, the lights were brightly lit, and officials from the Donglin party gathered at the Han mansion in the court. As a senior elder of the Donglin party, Han Zhu's qualifications are not inferior to those of Yi Xiang, and he is also the second deputy grand secretary of the cabinet. Yang Lian, the top thug of the Donglin party, was the first to speak up. Brother Sun, you are basically responsible for everything in this palace. What is the origin of Cao Yi? The person being asked is Sun Xinxing, the Minister of Rights. After thinking for a moment, Sun Xinxing said, I am not very clear about the origin of Cao Yi. Currently, all I know is that he appeared by His Majesty's side about 7 or 8 months ago. Upon hearing Sun Xinxing's answer, Han's face darkened and he said, Wen Si, how do you do things? You can even neglect things in the palace. Han Gong, I apologize for my mistake. Seeing that Han Xian's face was not right, Sun Shenxing quickly clenched his fists and admitted his mistake. Although he was the Minister of Rights, he was still a little short in front of Han Xian. Seeing Sun Shenxing's good attitude of admitting his mistake, Han didn't want to chase after him fiercely. He just waved his hand and said, "Just be careful in the future. Let's talk about what regulations should be in place for this new East Factory supervisor. Why don't we try to win over first?" someone suggested. Everyone put forward suggestions one after another. Whether it's to win over or suppress, the East Factory cannot become too big again. The matter of Lu Jin and Wang Zhi cannot happen again. Zhuo Guangdou, a senior elder of the Donglin party and an official appointed as the left censor of the imperial palace, spoke up and said, "There are loyal and virtuous officials like us in the court, and everyone is in power to benefit the court. There must be no more eunuchs like Lu Jin who will cause trouble to the court and bring trouble to your majesty." Upon hearing this, everyone nodded one after another. They also understood what Left Guangdou meant. Left Guangdou meant that regardless of Cao Yi's background, if he stayed in the East Factory honestly, everyone would be in peace. If there was any trouble, he would be destroyed without discussion. As for the emperor, he should stay well in the palace, and other matters should be handled by these ministers. As he watched the officials leaving one after another, a complex color flashed in Han's eyes. Once upon a time, he and Zhuo Guangdou were loyal ministers who were determined to revitalize the Ming Dynasty. Unfortunately, hundreds of years of ups and downs in the official seat eroded their loyalty, and the family behind them implicated their conscience. Old ties, please recommend and collect. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The Desperate East Factory. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The Desperate East Factory, resident. Are you the chief criminal of the East Factory? Cao Yi looked coldly at a middle-aged man wearing an official uniform. Looking at the handsome man in front of him, Dai Yan felt that his back had already soaked through. "I am the official." Dai Yan cautiously replied that the headquarters of the East Factory was located in the palace, and he knew very well about Cao Yi. The man in front of him looked handsome and gentle, but in reality, he was a ruthless executioner who killed people without blinking an eye. As soon as he took office, he carried out mass killings in the palace, arbitrarily executing even the noblewomen and palace maids. As long as he targeted him, he would inevitably die. Dai Yan dared to guarantee that even Lu Jin, who had once been in power, dared not be so reckless. That's how you manage the East Factory. The Tang East Factory can't even leave the capital now. Cao Yi's tone was cold, and his piercing gaze made Dai Yan tremble all over. "Master, spare your life." Upon encountering Cao Yi's cold gaze, Dai Yan felt a chill in his heart. With a loud snap, he knelt down and felt that if his answer did not satisfy Cao Yi, he would never mind pinching him. "Stand up and answer." "Yes, Lord." Dai Yan was inspired and said, "Commander, this matter should start with His Majesty Shenzong. Our East Factory has been suppressed and our strength has been in a low valley since His Majesty Shenzong was in power. When His Majesty Shenzong passed away, the court and the public were in turmoil, and the East Factory was secretly surrounded by various forces. Later, His Majesty Guangzong ascended to power, and the East Factory was fortunate enough to have a chance to breathe. However, soon after, His Majesty Guangzong also passed away, and the court and the public were once again in turmoil. This time, the East Factory was not so lucky. In just a few months, several of the top experts in the East Factory died, resigned from their positions, and the position of governor hung in the air. The big East Factory, now only I, a fourth-grade warrior, am left to take on the main responsibility, and there are only 7 or 8 other 5th or 6th grade warriors left, almost unable to fill the basic positions in the East Factory. After listening to Dai Yan's explanation, Cao Yi furrowed his brows. He knew that the current East Factory was in decline, but he didn't expect it to be so miserable that even a larger family power couldn't match it. So what is the current news channel of the East Factory? Lord Hui, thanks to the secret system, the information channels of the East Factory are still relatively smooth now, Dai Yan quickly replied. Upon hearing the news, the channels were relatively smooth, and Cao Yi's face finally improved a bit. At least it didn't feel down to the point of being useless. So how is the situation on the side of the royal guards? Dai Yan was taken aback for a moment, but quickly reacted and said with a bitter smile, Commander, the Genie Way is similar to our East Factory and has been heavily suppressed in recent years. However, the Genie Way also serves as a part of the Imperial Palace's guard work, so there are many more experts than our East Factory. There are commanders who are 3rd level strong, and there are also 2 3rd level strong, and there are more than 10 4th level strong, but like our East Factory, they cannot leave the capital. Many of the cavalry who left the capital have been surrounded and killed, so they basically dare not send people out of the capital now. Is that so? Cao Yi lightly tapped the handle of the chair with his fingers, calculating the current situation in his heart. Dai Yan, please organize the current intelligence of various forces and wait for me to review it. After speaking, Cao Yi walked out of the headquarters of the East Factory. Yes, Lord. Watching Cao Yi's departure, Dai Yan breathed a sigh of relief and finally passed the level. At least his life was saved. The British government. Duke, is this Governor Cao sent by Our Majesty to bite people? Looking at the silent colleagues, Gu Zhaoji, the Marquis of Zhenyuan, was the first to speak up. Zhang Weixian shook his head and said, I don't know, Your Majesty hasn't spoken to me either. I hope not, otherwise. Zhang Weixian said half of it before continuing, but everyone present knew what he meant. If it were sent by the Emperor, the civil servants in the court would probably not give up easily. It's hard to say that they would change emperors, just like Emperor Wu of the past, Zhu Youxiao. After a long silence, the Marquis of Xining, Song Yuda, said, Duke of China, what will we do next to that Cao governor? After thinking for a while, Zhang Weixian finally spoke up, anyway, our first condition is self-protection. As long as he doesn't touch us, we will be safe and sound. If he takes action against those people from the Donglin party, then if there is a chance, we will fall into trouble. After some discussion, everyone left one after another. Looking at the figures of everyone, Zhang Weixian couldn't help but sigh. His spirit was quite lethargic, as if he had aged several years in an instant. After the Battle of Tu Bao, the strong members of the Wu Sun family perished, and the civil servants took advantage of the opportunity to seize most of their power and resources. Even the headquarters of the Wu Sun family and the 5 army commanders' office were taken away. If he weren't worried about doing too much, the Wu Sun family would have perished with them. It is estimated that even a little scum would not have been left behind for the Wu Sun family. The power and resources were taken away, and in addition, the strong members of the Wu Sun family all perished. From then on, the Wushuan faction suffered a decline. He was a prominent British duke and a leader of the Wushuan faction. He was now only a second-class warrior, and most of the other nobles were of the 3rd and 4th rank, not to mention the Donglin party. Even the Kun party and the Zhejiang party were not weaker than their Wushuan faction, and it was not easy to maintain the current situation. I only hoped that Governor Cao would not attack them. As soon as he walked out of the East Factory, Cao Yi saw a person blocking in front of the Fengtian gate, seemingly waiting for someone. However, Cao Yi knew that that person was waiting for him, because that person was Sun Xinxing, the person in charge of communication in the palace in the Donglin party. Seeing a young man in a white scholar robe in the distance, with a handsome appearance and elegant temperament, Sun Xinxing knew that the person he was waiting for had arrived. Cao Duzhu. Sun Xinxing arched his hand, with an impeccable smile on his face, neither humble nor overbearing. In his eyes, he couldn't see the arrogance of those who claimed to be gentlemen, but rather a sense of equal treatment. Upon seeing this scene, Cao Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. The rise of the Donglin party was indeed not a stroke of luck. From Sun Qinqing, one could tell that even if someone else showed enthusiasm on their face, their disdain for a eunuch like a disabled person could not be concealed. However, from Sun Qinqing's eyes, all they saw was equal treatment. If he were truly just a eunuch, Sun Qinqing's attitude alone would win his favor. Mr. Sunday. Although countless thoughts flashed through his heart, Cao Yi still bowed and said, "I wonder why Lord Sun came to our house for." Sun Qinqing smiled and said, "I heard that Governor Cao is in charge of the East Factory, so we have prepared gifts and a banquet at the Cloud Fragrance Pavilion. We sincerely hope that Governor Cao can come and visit us. Different ways do not conspire with each other. Your Majesty rewards us with peace of mind. We dare not take other people's things, they are hot to the touch." Upon hearing Sun Qinqing's words, Cao Yi calmly replied. Regarding Cao Yi's attitude, Sun Qinqing was not angry and still said with a smile, "Your Highness, there's no need to refuse so quickly. We'll wait for you at the fragrant pavilion. Your Highness has considered it and can come any time." After speaking, Sun Qinqing left with a smile. Dear old iron workers, we are looking for recommendation, collection, introduction, and quality. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Clam Beads. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Clam Beads Qianqing Palace, a small imperial supervisor. This was set up specifically in the Qianqing Palace by Zhu Youxiao, who complained that it was too troublesome to travel back and forth to the imperial palace. Zhu Youxiao, who had been keeping his eyes closed, suddenly opened them, with nothing but a hint of icy cold seeping into his bone marrow. Those unruly officials and thieves were indeed unwilling to let him once again take control of power, but appointed a destitute leader of the East Factory and came eagerly to take eye drops. Sun Qinqing was waiting for Cao Yi's intentions at the Fengtian Gate with a carefree attitude, and Zhu Youxiao was clear about it. It was nothing more than a plot to sow discord. However, Zhu Youxiao had to admit that these old foxes were not really fuel-efficient lamps. They were familiar with the emperor's suspicious mentality, and although the means of estrangement were extremely simple, they were actually a real conspiracy. Whether the emperor believed it or not, this thorn was also planted. As long as the time was ripe and some rumors were added, it could produce astonishing results. Unfortunately, even if you are cunning like ghosts, you still need to drink the young master's foot wash. Zhu Youxiao sneered. If this plan were to fall on someone else, he would also have some doubts. After all, on one side was a puppet emperor with only one name left, and on the other was the powerful Donglin party. Can it fall on Cao Yi? Hee. These old foxes probably couldn't even imagine that Cao Yi would actually be the incarnation of his Zhu Youxiao. This scheme of estrangement can be seen as throwing a seductive eye at the blind. "Emperor, it's time for dinner." Wei Zhongxian called out softly at the door. "Bring it here." Zhu Youxiao looked at the sky outside the window and casually said, "Yes, my lord." Wei Zhongxian bowed in response and immediately retreated to arrange. Not long after, a group of eunuchs arrived at the small imperial palace holding exquisite trays and delicious dishes. When the eunuchs carefully arranged the dishes, Zhu Youxiao waved his hand and asked everyone to leave. Seeing Zhu Youxiao wave his hand, Wei Zhongxian quickly withdrew from the imperial household department with all the eunuchs. Since the first time he pretended to be clever and wanted to stay and serve Zhu Youxiao, he was scolded by Zhu Youxiao's motto and dared not pretend to be clever anymore. When everyone withdrew from the small imperial guard, Zhu Youxiao finally took out a green pearl from the gray space in his mind. This was a treasure he had signed in with, a first-grade treasure-level clam pearl of the blue-eyed red clam, which could transform 1,000 miasma and distinguish 10,000 poisons. Sweeping the beads over each dish and seeing that their color remained unchanged, Zhu Youxiao confidently retrieved the beads from his mind. It's not that he was too skeptical, it's just that he couldn't help but not be skeptical. After obtaining this clam pearl, he discovered various chronic poisons in his imperial meal, especially one that made Zhu Youxiao still feel cold all over his body. It's a poison that can lurk deep in the human body and have no symptoms after being poisoned. However, once he comes into contact with a drug primer, the poisoned person will lose control of their whole body and become a puppet of others. Even a strong person of the first grade cannot resist the toxicity of this poison. Fortunately, this poison requires years and months of use to work, and he gets Clam Pearl. It's more timely, otherwise the consequences would be unimaginable. So after the incarnation of flesh and blood was conceived, the first thing Zhu Youxiao did was to blood wash the imperial palace, especially the imperial dining room and the imperial hospital. These two places were also the key areas that Zhu Youxiao cleaned. Just these two places alone, Zhu Youxiao killed nearly 300 people, almost half of them. It can be imagined how insane the people outside were to control the emperor. In the evening, Han Mansion. At this moment, Han and Gao Panlong are in secret discussions. Brother Han, it seems that Cao Yi doesn't accept our kindness. Gao Panlong held a teacup and gently blew it, with a sharp look flashing in his eyes. Very normal. Han took a sip of his tea and said calmly, "Since your majesty can let him take charge of the East factory, it shows that he still has loyalty. However, since he refuses to accept our kindness, it indicates that he still wants to cause trouble. This requires more attention, so don't let him take advantage of it." Brother Han, since that's the case, why not? Gao Panlong didn't finish speaking directly, but made a downward cutting gesture with his hand. No way. Hands on in the capital, there is too much noise, which can easily lead to problems, Han said, blocking his way. What should we do? Wait for him to take action against us. Gao Panlong frowned and his face was displeased. Don't worry, brother Gao, son Shangshu has a plan on his side. Han stroked his long beard, we just need brother Gao's full support. Gao Panlong clenched his fists and said, Brother Han, Gao Panlong, will not shirk responsibility. Han took a sip of his tea and said, we are guarding the capital, and he can't afford any trouble. So if he wants to take action, he can only go outside the capital. Next, please bring more experts to ambush outside the 4 gates of the capital. If Cao Yi dares to leave the capital, then. Han gestured for a downward cut and said, if he doesn't leave the capital for a long time without any achievements, let's spread a little more rumors. Even if His Majesty trusts him again, his heart will shake. Then we will secretly add fuel to the situation. Han stroked his long beard and said, then he will either join us or be abandoned by His Majesty. The next day, at the headquarters of the East Factory, Cao Yi slowly flipped through the materials bit by bit, while Dai Yan stood behind him, not daring to take a breath. Looking at the materials that Cao Yi had flipped through, Dai Yan suddenly felt palpitations. All of them were information from the Donglin party, and not just ordinary materials. All of them were evidence of crime. If confirmed, at least they were the kind of plagiarism. Dai Yan swallowed his saliva in secret. This Governor Cao wants to show his claws against the Donglin party. What should I do then? Should I resign from my position? I don't know how I died fighting against those hypocrites from the Donglin party. Just as Dai Yan's head was in chaos, Cao Yi suddenly said, Dai Qianhu has been in control of the East Factory for many years. Now, the Donglin party is covering the sky in the court and treating His Majesty as if he had nothing. As the sword in His Majesty's hand, I wonder if Dai Qianhu has any good strategy. Sure enough. Upon hearing Cao Yi's words, Dai Yan's scalp tingled and he thought to himself, Cao Yi is trying to figure out which side he belongs to. Lord Hui, now the Donglin party controls the court, and 60.7 out of 10 officials in the capital are from the Donglin party. They have already run the capital tightly, and the only way to break the situation is to go out of the capital and find the flaws of the Donglin party outside the capital, in order to truly break the current situation. After careful consideration, Dai Yan cautiously said, but instead kicked the ball back to Cao Yi. After all, the current East Factory is so destitute that it cannot even leave the capital city. This strategy is just a pie painting, and besides being able to see, it is of no use. Dear old iron workers, we are looking for recommendation, collection, introduction, and quality. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Rising Winds and Clouds. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Rising Winds and Clouds. After hearing Dai Yan's words, Cao Yi took a deep look at him. He was an old fogey, but it coincided with his idea. Now the Donglin party is in charge of the government, and its attacks on them in the capital are nothing. After thinking for a while, Cao Yi smiled and said, "Not bad. It's just that my cultivation is a bit poor. This is the third-grade treasure pill. D-Yuan-Dan. Take it and practice well." After throwing a bottle of elixir to Dai Yan, Cao Yi walked out of the East Factory with his hands on his back. Watching Cao Yi's gradually receding figure, Dai Yan glanced at the earth source pill in his hand. Dai Yan's expression was so conflicted that he wanted to stop Cao Yi, but when he spoke, he couldn't utter it. Cao Yi's meaning, how could he not understand? It is clear that he should stand in line, either on the side of his supervisor Cao or on the side of the Donglin party. Dai Yan was conflicted that the Donglin party did not see him as a useless 1,000 households in the East Factory. On Cao Yi's side, he is full of sincerity. He is a third-grade treasure pill when he makes a move, but it is dangerous to stand on Cao Yi's side. It is not much harder for the Donglin party to crush a fourth-grade warrior than to crush an ant. Glancing at the Dun pill in his hand again, Dai Yan gritted his teeth and returned to his duty room. He couldn't bear to return the pill to Cao Yi. This bottle of Dun pill was worth his 10-year salary, and he had to eat or drink it for 10 years to afford it. Besides, even if he gave the Dun pill back to Cao Yi wouldn't give him good fruit to eat. The best result was being kicked out of the East Factory by Cao Yi. The East Factory is not the court, and the East Factory is Cao Yi's one man. Whoever wants to be abolished, they will be abolished without anyone's consent. The most tragic thing is that he has been 1,000 households in the East Factory for so many years, and those who offend him can be expelled from Beijing. With the presence of officials, those people have no way to deal with him, but if he loses his official position, those people can drown him with just a mouthful of saliva. Anyway, they are all dead, so it's better to follow Cao Yi to eat and drink spicy food. At least Cao Yi is generous enough, so that death is imminent and there is no regret. Bring over the files from room 6. Dai Yanqiao said to a stall next to him. Yes, 1,000 households. While flipping through the archives, Dai Yan recorded information about the strong members of the Donglin party and what he believed was important. Although he did not believe that following Cao Yi could bring down the behemoth of the Donglin party, even the fish on the chopping board knew how to jump and jump. If he had to stand and wait to die, he would not be able to do anything. He had also killed thousands of households from the bottom all the way, and there was still some blood in him. In the evening, Dai Yan found Cao Yi with a document. "Governor, this is the information compiled by my humble duty." Dai Yan respectfully placed a thick document on Cao Yi's desk. "What information is it?" Cao Yi looked at Dai Yan in surprise. Although his previous act of giving pills had the intention of making Dai Yan choose to stand in line, Dai Yan seemed to be standing in line a bit quickly. "Lord Hui, these are some information about the strong members of the Donglin party, as well as some reliable information from the secret reports." Well, Dai Qianhu has worked hard. After flipping through the materials compiled by Dai Yan, Cao Yi was satisfied and said that Dai Yan had been in charge of the East Factory for so many years. Although he was just slacking off, it was not just slacking off. The materials compiled could save him a lot of effort. The governor's words are heavy, this is the duty of despicable duty. Dai Yan replied in a deep voice. The next day, early in the morning, Dai Yan hurriedly found Cao Yi. As soon as he saw Cao Yi, Dai Yan arched his hand and said, "Governor, I have just received an urgent report." Cao Yi, who was buried in researching the data, raised his head and said, "What urgent report?" Just now, a secret message came from outside the capital that there was a group of unfamiliar strong men outside the 4 gates of the capital. What does it mean? Cao Yi frowned, knowing that Dai Yan wouldn't shoot indiscriminately. He must have discovered something before coming to find him. Governor Hui, as an important area of the capital, there are countless strong individuals in the capital. Generally, apart from officials who report their duties, there are very few unfamiliar strong individuals appearing around the capital, as it is highly likely to provoke hostility from the strong individuals in the capital. Cao Yi raised his eyebrows and said, "What do you think?" "I suspect they are here to intercept the governor." Dai Yan gritted his teeth and revealed his guess, which he himself was not sure about, but he felt that the possibility was still quite high. "Oh. Why?" Cao Yi gave him a surprised look. "Return to the governor, because the former governor Zhu Youxiao is highly likely to have died in the hands of this group of people." "Are you serious about this?" Cao Yi's face turned cold. The former head of the East Factory, Zhu Youxiao, was a strong figure in the later stage of the 3rd grade. However, after leaving the capital, he was unable to see anyone alive or dead, and his elite members of the East Factory also disappeared. There has been no news of him to this day. According to Dai Yan, Zhu Youxiao, along with hundreds of elite members of the East Factory, died in the hands of these people and could not even receive any news. Therefore, their strength is probably beyond imagination, with at least one level of strength present. Otherwise, Zhu Youxiao would not have been unable to even receive any news. Returning to the supervisor, it is absolutely true. Before the former supervisor left the capital to handle affairs, the East Factory received a message that a group of unfamiliar strong men had appeared outside the capital. However, no one would have thought at that time that someone dared to intercept the East Factory supervisor. When the former supervisor was found missing, there was no place to investigate. And my subordinate also personally went to the city gate to inspect, and found that there were strong individuals practicing pupil techniques disguised as soldiers, inspecting the personnel entering and exiting the capital. I understand, Dai Qianhu has worked hard. Cao Yi said indifferently and took out a bottle of sky blue liquid with a hint of starlight from the storage ring. This is a bottle of heavenly star spring, which has a good effect in clearing erysipelas. Thank you, Commander. Dai Yan held the spring of heavenly stars with an excited expression. He didn't expect Cao Yi to be so generous that he could receive rewards for reporting any news. Watching Dai Yan leave, Cao Yi smiled. The reason why he was so generous was not because he burned too much money, but just to win over Dai Yan. Now it seems that the effect is still good. Although it is unknown how high Dai Yan's loyalty is now, at least he is a useful person. However, thinking of the information provided by Dai Yan, Cao Yi's face darkened. He had thought that the people of the Donglin party would not easily let him take power, but he also did not expect that those people would be so bold and reckless, daring to send people to intercept and kill the leader of the East Factory outside the capital. This was different from the rebellion, which was just that there was no uprising. Dear old iron workers, we are looking for recommendation, collection, introduction, and quality. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Response from all parties. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Response from all parties. At this time, leaders of numerous political parties such as Fang Songzhe and Zhejiang, Qi, and Chu gathered in Fang's mansion. Mr. Fang, today I received a report that Gao Panlong, along with numerous 3rd and 4th level masters, was hiding outside the 4 gates of the capital, seemingly wanting to repeat the act of strangling Zhu Youxiao. Wu Liangxi, the leader of the Chu party, bowed his hand and said that although Fang Songzhe had lost his position as the head and assistant of the cabinet, as a first-class strong man, Fang Songzhe was still the backbone of the various parties in Zhejiang, Qi, and Chu. Even if the Donglin party squeezed him out of the court, they dared not exterminate him completely. It was precisely because of Fang Zongzhe's existence that these miscellaneous parties could barely compete with the Donglin party. Fang Zongzhe stroked his long beard and said, "This is very normal. Now that the Donglin party is in power, the emperor wants to regain power, and those people from the Donglin party want to stop it. It's normal. However, the hypocrites of the Donglin party are indeed quite ruthless. When Emperor Guangzong passed away, they colluded everywhere and gathered numerous powerful political parties in the court to besiege the many experts of the East Factory and the royal guards. Now that they want to do it again, it is obvious that they want to make the current emperor a true sculpture. But are we just looking at it this way? When the Donglin party destroys Cao Yi, the leader of the East Factory, we are afraid that their power will expand again, and our situation will become even more difficult." The leader of the Qi party, Zhou Yuanchun, spoke up. "Of course not." Fang Zongzhe narrowed his eyes slightly and said, "Zongwen, take some strong members of various parties out of the city and find ways to contain them. Try to protect Cao Yi as much as possible. If things cannot be done, then leave as much evidence as possible." "Yes, sir." As Fang Zongzhe's top hitter, Yao Zongwen, sitting at the bottom, arched his hand and responded. "But helping Cao Yi means helping His Majesty, isn't it? Isn't our previous move to weaken imperial power futile?" A Zhejiang party official hesitated and said. "Stupid." Fang Zongzhe glanced at the official who was speaking, and a word burst out of his mouth. At the same time, he blacklisted this person in his heart, whether it was a party dispute or weakening imperial power, in order to gain more power. Initially, weakening imperial power was because they were in charge of the court, but now they are not in charge of the court. Such a fool who cannot even see the most basic reality is not worth wasting party resources to promote. After retracting his gaze, Fang Zongzhe said, "Now in the court, officials from the Donglin party and those who hold the name of the Donglin party occupy 60% of the positions, our various parties occupy 20%, and the remaining 10% are occupied by the Li family in Liaodong, the Wu Sun group, and some scattered officials. Now that your Majesty wants to take power, the only way to do so is to take action against the Donglin party. However, among the officials of the Manchu dynasty, besides the Donglin party, we have the most people. Your Majesty has eradicated those people from the Donglin party. Who else can your Majesty use besides us?" Fang Zongzhe glanced at the crowd and said with a smile, "In this way, we only need to exert a little force behind our backs to sit and watch the sandpipers and clams compete, and easily take profits from the fishermen. Even if your Majesty cannot defeat the Donglin party, we will remain unscathed. Your Majesty is wise." Numerous officials are bowing their hands. At night, by the city wall, Cao Yi restrained his breath and dressed in black, like a night cat, staring fixedly at the officers and soldiers patrolling the city wall. Taking advantage of the gap between the patrols of the officers and soldiers, Cao Yi immediately rose into the air and stepped onto the wall. At this moment, Cao Yi clearly felt a faint wave sweeping past him, but he did not stop. With a rise and fall, he crossed the city wall. A patrolling officer and soldier seemed to notice something, suddenly turned around and looked behind him. "Lu Laoer, what's wrong?" Sun Fu, who was walking beside him, asked. Lu hesitated for a moment and said, "I think I saw someone cross the city wall and leave the city just now." Upon hearing this, Sun Fu immediately looked at him with a strange expression and said with a wicked smile, "Lu, you probably had your eyes watered down last night by your mother. Law." Others burst into laughter upon hearing the words, and the leading officer, Wu Chang, also smiled and said, "Lu Laoer, you need to be more restrained. This capital is shrouded in a large formation, and except for the 4 gates that can enter and exit, anyone who dares to break into other places will be crushed to death by the formation even if Wu Zun comes. Yeah, Lu Laoer, there are only tired cows, not plowed fields. Others also joked and said. On the other side of the city wall, Cao Yi was tightly adhering to the wall, avoiding everyone's sight. He could hear the conversations between the officers and soldiers on the wall clearly. The reason why the people of the Donglin party chose to ambush him outside the 4 gates of the capital was also because of this. However, everyone did not know that the defense of the Zhulongjinyan formation, which covered the entire Beijing city, had a disadvantage that was not a disadvantage, and it was ineffective against the emperor. In the early days, Emperor Yongle of Ming Dynasty, who was on his 5th expedition to Mongolia and 7 voyages to the west, went through countless hardships and searched the world, and finally captured 9 major dragon veins, forging the Zhulongjinyan formation to defend the emperor. In the city of Beijing, he suppressed the Ming dynasty's national movement and discovered this flaw only after reading a large number of ancient texts passed down by the old Zhu family. After all, since the founding of the Ming dynasty, no emperor has been forced to flee the capital through a wall. As the voices of the patrol officers and soldiers gradually faded away, Cao Yi clung tightly to the ground, like a black spirit snake. With the help of his black clothes and the absence of tonight's moonlight, Cao Yi quickly ran on the ground without attracting anyone's attention. He ran for thousands of meters until he entered the forest outside the city. It was only then that Cao Yi stopped on a large tree, which had already escaped the surveillance range of the officers and soldiers on the city wall. Standing on the top of the tree, Cao Yi's eyes flickered with clarity. Eye of Qi Luck. This is a small magical power he obtained by checking in, which allows him to observe the Qi luck and the Qi mechanism of heaven and earth. With the operation of his divine powers, the scenery in Cao Yi's eyes suddenly changed, and the whole world was shrouded in a gray feeling. In the distance, a colorful light shield appeared over Beijing, enveloping the entire city under the light shield. Moving my gaze to the distant city gate, hundreds of beams of light instantly caught my eye, including 1 blue, 5 cyans, and dozens of greens, among others. The Donglin party is really good, with 1 second-level expert, 5 third-level strong players, and more than 10 fourth-level players. The entire Donglin party has been sent out. At the moment of seeing the pillar of light, Cao Yi clenched his teeth and took a cold breath straight towards the heavenly Lingai. He was suppressed by the great formation in the capital, unable to see his luck. Although he knew that someone from the Donglin party had intercepted him at the city gate, Cao Yi did not expect that the Donglin party would be so ruthless, sending so many strong people to intercept him. This was still a city gate, and how many strong were the 4 city gates? The Qi luck of officials in the Ming dynasty ranges from 9th grade to 1st grade, namely white, black, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. Although Qi luck does not represent combat power, without that strength, they cannot stand in that position. After looking for a while, Cao Yi withdrew his Qi luck eye, completely restrained his breath, and quietly left. Dear old iron workers, we are looking for recommendation, collection, introduction, and quality. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. White Tiger Formation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. White Tiger Formation. Outside the city gate, there is a dense forest. The 2 groups were facing off, and Cao Yi was unaware that the hundreds of beams of light he saw were not just from the Donglin party. Mr. Gao, with such great interest, late at night, bringing so many colleagues to this wilderness forest to admire the moon. Yao Zongwen looked at Gao Panlong with a smile, followed by dozens of people. At the moment of seeing Yao Zongwen, Gao Panlong's face turned black, especially as Yao Zongwen was carrying a large group of strong men, indicating that he was coming to cause trouble. Gao Panlong's face turned black and he said coldly, "What is Lord Yao here for? He can't come for a picnic in the middle of the night." Those who came to admire the moon heard that Lord Gao was here with many colleagues, so many of us took the liberty of disturbing him. Yao Zongwen seemed unable to see Gao Panlong's unattractive expression and smiled as he arched his hand. Gao Panlong glanced at the cloudy moonless sky, feeling that Yao Zongwen was treating him like a fool. "Yao Zongwen, I advise you to bring someone back obediently." The road is slippery in the dark, so be careful not to get out and not go back. Gao Panlong spoke in a cold tone and looked at Yao Zongwen with a gloomy expression. Yao Zongwen was Fang Zongzhe's top lackey, ruthless and cunning, who had ruined their good deeds many times. If he stayed here, they wouldn't do anything. Just keep an eye on him. It's okay, we're carrying the lights. No matter how dark it is, we're not afraid. Yao Zongwen's smile remained unchanged, and a firefly white stone floated on his right hand, spinning non-stop. Shadow stone. Humph. Let's go. At the moment of seeing the firefly white stone, Gao Panlong's originally black face turned even darker. He let out a cold snort and left with the crowd. Yao Zongwen, this dog skin ointment, couldn't be thrown away or beaten, and he was beaten up. When he caused trouble in the court, Gao Panlong would also have a hard time. Cut. Keep up. Seeing Gao Panlong leave with his people, Yao Zongwen sneered and led his men behind them. He had already taken care of Gao Panlong. If he encountered Gao Panlong and his group of people in any wilderness, he would probably run faster than a rabbit. After all, in the wilderness, if Gao Panlong were to use poison and directly kill him, he would die in vain without anyone knowing it. However, this is at the foot of the imperial city. With Gao Panlong's 100 courage, he dare not act recklessly. Killing Cao Yi is also fine, as he is a eunuch and not on the same side as them. As long as there is no evidence left by anyone, there is some. It is a reason to evade, but one can kill important officials of the court without authorization. Even if the emperor wants to kill a minister, he must learn from his reputation. If Gao Panlong dares to do so, the Donglin party will not lose half of its members, and this matter cannot be avoided. On the other side, Xianqing Palace, a small imperial supervisor. Sensing that Cao Yi had already left the capital, Zhu Youxiao couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief as he had been paying attention to the situation on Cao Yi's side. Although he knew that Cao Yi had a good chance of crossing the city wall and leaving the capital, Zhu Youxiao was still worried about something unexpected. If Cao Yi's flesh and blood incarnation were to break, he would definitely be severely injured. It wouldn't take 3 to 5 years for him to conceive a new incarnation. After thinking for a while, Zhu Youxiao closed his eyes again and entered a state of cultivation. Hall of Supreme Harmony, Early Dynasty. Sitting on the dragon chair, watching the civil and military ministers arguing in a ball below, Zhu Youxiao couldn't help but yawn. These guys are really idle. They caught a Wu Xuanjuan who was disrespectful and could argue about even trivial matters. System, sign in. Zhu Youxiao silently recited in his heart. Congratulations to the host, successfully signed in and obtained the second-level military formation. White Tiger Formation. The mechanical sound of the system rang out, and at the same time, a huge amount of knowledge rushed directly into Zhu Youxiao's mind. This is not the first time that Zhu Youxiao's mind has been impacted. His face remains unchanged, but he silently digests and absorbs knowledge about the White Tiger Formation. After digesting the knowledge of the White Tiger Formation, Zhu Youxiao's eyes flashed with a hint of joy. Good thing. After signing in for over a year, the best thing he had signed in for was the 1-grade treasure-level Clam bead. It seems that his current imperial power was divided by the full court ministers, resulting in a lack of luck. After signing in for over a year, Zhu Youxiao had never signed in for a spirit-level treasure, but the best one was the Clam bead. There were many other miscellaneous things, such as top-grade treasures, alchemy formulas, spirit wine formulas, etc. Zhu Youxiao also signed in some of them. Unfortunately, for him, he did not lack these things, and there were many of them in the private treasure trove of the old Zhu family. For him, the White Tiger Formation is truly a good thing. Although there are also military formations in this world, they are relatively simple and only aim to enhance the commander's combat power. There is not much improvement for the soldiers in the formation, and they even have to bear the pressure of enhancing the commander's combat power. It is okay to use it for defending the city. Once they go to battle, the harm outweighs the benefit. The only advantage is that the requirements for soldiers are not high, and ordinary soldiers can handle it. The White Tiger Formation is different. The White Tiger Formation belongs to the training formation, and each soldier needs special training, which is huge. Of course, the cost is huge, and the power of the White Tiger Formation is also incredibly powerful. Once trained, the White Tiger Formation is incredibly powerful. Success, in addition to significantly enhancing the combat effectiveness of soldiers, can even condense the White Tiger Shadow, with infinite power. After daydreaming for a while, Zhu Youxiao came to his senses and found that the argument in the court was almost over. So Zhu Youxiao gave a glance to Wang An, who was accompanying him. Upon receiving Zhu Youxiao's gaze, Wang An also had a clear idea and sang loudly, "Retreat." The civil and military ministers who were making a lot of noise were immediately taken aback, but they quickly reacted. The emperor was displeased when they and others started talking. "I'm sorry to inform you." The courtiers bowed and withdrew one after another. Imperial Garden. Wei Daban, is the leopard house built by Emperor Wuzong still here today? Zhu Youxiao suddenly spoke up and asked. Wei Zhongxian, who was accompanying him, was slightly stunned when he heard this. He immediately reacted and said, "Back to the emperor, the leopard house is still here, but it's almost abandoned now." Why? Don't even the children of the privileged nowadays enjoy hunting? Zhu Youxiao was surprised that the leopard house was a place where the powerful officials in the capital raised raptors and beasts for hunting and entertainment. Emperor Wuzong also built a new leopard house for this purpose. Returning to the emperor, the court's ministers are watching closely, and the children of the powerful are relatively honest. The meaning in Wei Zhongxian's words was heard by Zhu Youxiao. The civil service group was too strong, and they forcefully suppressed the privileged children of the Wu Sun clique into a wealthy lady who could not leave the main gate and could not walk out of the second gate. Thinking of this, Zhu Youxiao couldn't help but shake his head. The root cause of the imbalance between civil and military forces was the Tu Bao incident. To rebalance, this matter was more difficult than suppressing the Donglin party, and it was more likely to cause backlash from the civil officials of the Manchu dynasty. This was also the reason why he did not seek the support of the Wu Sun faction. Dear old iron workers, we are looking for recommendation, collection, introduction, and quality. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Striving for the East and Striving for the West. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Striving for the East and Striving for the West, Wei Daban orders the royal guards to capture 10,000 fierce tigers and captive them to the leopard house. Catching tigers. Wei Zhongxian was confused. The emperor's thinking was too detached, and he couldn't figure it out at all. "I obey your orders." Feeling confused, Wei Zhongxian instinctively bowed and responded. "Go ahead." Zhu Youxiao waved his hand and turned back to Qianqing Palace. The Royal Guards Yamen. "Wei Gonggang, did you say you want to catch tigers?" "And 10,000 more." After listening to the instructions conveyed by Wei Zhongxian, Luo Sigong's whole body was in a bad mood. Let them go catch the tiger with the royal guards. Isn't this nonsense? Is Commander Luo suspicious of our family's private transmission of orders? Noticing the suspicion in Luo Sigong's words, Wei Zhongxian immediately became displeased and looked at him coldly. Wei Gonggang misunderstood. How dare I serve as an official? Seeing Wei Zhongxian's displeased expression, Luo Sigong quickly explained and stuffed a silver bill into his generous mouth. With a sideways glance at the silver banknotes and 300 spirit stones, Wei Zhongxian's mood suddenly improved a lot. A hint of a smile appeared on his gloomy face. Although it wasn't a lot, it could still be used for cultivation for a while. Previously, there were some unremarkable income, but since Cao Yi took control of the imperial palace, he dared not touch those unremarkable money anymore, fearing that he might end up spending his life. Seeing Wei Zhongxian's face improve, Luo Sigong breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Although Wei Zhongxian, a eunuch with a pen, no longer had much power, his elder brother didn't laugh at his second brother. The current royal guards were already half abolished, and Wei Zhongxian still relied on the emperor. He was now a little transparent. If he angered Wei Zhongxian, he would run to the emperor's ear and chew on his tongue a few times. Maybe he would have to go home and plant sweet potatoes. Duke Wei, how could your majesty suddenly want to raise a tiger? Luo Sigong asked pleasantly, and at the same time, he stuffed a silver ticket over again. Silently accepting the silver note handed over by Luo Sigong, who can guess the emperor's thoughts. However, Lord Luo's opportunity may have come. After saying a vague sentence, Wei Zhongxian turned around and left the royal guard's yamen, leaving Luo Sigong standing there alone. He can accept this money from Wei Zhongxian, but he cannot speak too clearly, otherwise it is easy to make taboos. Luo Sigong, who remained in place, watched Wei Zhongxian leave and remembered the recent events in the court. He paused in place for a moment, feeling lost in thought. Emperor, the maidservants on the side of the royal guards have already sent orders. At the entrance of the Zhuoyang prison, Wei Zhongxian respectfully said. Zhu Youxiao responded indifferently, send the order and repair the restrictions on the leopard house. Don't let the tiger run out and cause panic when the time comes. I obey your orders. After giving the order, Zhu Youxiao's lips curved into a faint smile. He asked the royal guards to catch the tiger not out of curiosity, but because in order to form a white tiger formation, it was necessary to first cultivate white tiger cavalry. Each soldier needed a tiger as a mount. The reason why the royal guards were sent was not only because of the need for white tiger cavalry, but also because Zhu Youxiao planned to let the royal guards go out to attract the attention of the Donglin party. Although Cao Yi had quietly left the capital now, if he didn't find something to do for the Donglin party, they might have been suspicious of gods and ghosts all day. By then, Cao Yi would have quietly left the capital. The probability of exposure will also increase significantly. Han Prefecture. Pop. A delicate teacup was smashed hard to the ground, making a crisp sound. Yao Zongwen, this old dog, one day I will kill him. Gao Panlong's face was fierce and terrifying, as if he wanted to choose someone to devour. Brother Gao, please be calm and don't be impatient, Han said in a comforting voice. After all, he was rolling in the officialdom, and Gao Panlong's mansion was still acceptable. Although he was almost blown up by Yao Zongwen's anger, he calmed down after losing his temper. Brother Han, now Yao Zongwen is sticking to us like a dog's skin ointment and can't shake it off. Even if Cao Yi leaves the capital, we may not have a chance to take action. Gao Panlong sighed. Yao Zongwen has been guarding his doorstep for the past few days. As soon as he left, he would stick to him, making sarcastic remarks useless, just like a piece of dog skin ointment. Han's face was also gloomy, and he didn't expect people from the Zhejiang party to come and stir up trouble. Brother Sun, have the relationships in the palace been established yet? Sun Qinqing shook his head and said, not yet. Since Cao Yi cleaned up, most of the people who lean towards us have been cleaned up. Now the people in the palace are much more cautious, and it's no use stuffing money. They all have a face of business. If we want to get through the relationship in the palace again, it may take some time until the waves calm down. What should we do then? No one in the palace is staring at Cao Yi, and I have been stared at by Yao Zongwen's old dog again. Who knows if Cao Yi will suddenly sneak out of the city? Gao Panlong's eyebrows furrowed, and the seal of the East Factory governor could open the side door of the capital at any time. These days, he has been guarding the city gate with people day and night, just worried that Cao Yi would leave quietly, and no one in the palace would be watching. He is really worried. There's no need to worry about this. We have arranged for strong people who are proficient in pupil techniques to guard each city gate. Even first-class strong people cannot avoid their eyes. As long as Cao Yi dares to leave the city, he will definitely die. Han Xian took a sip of tea with a serious tone. It's just that there is no eyeliner in the palace, which is also a trouble. Today, we are calling on everyone to come over. Apart from Cao Yi's matter, there is another matter that needs to be carefully discussed. Brother Han, what kind of moth has appeared in the palace again? Zhu Guangdou raised his thick eyebrows. Now that their Donglin party is in power, everyone else is scattered and even their old rival, the Zhejiang party, has been defeated by them. The only thing that can make Han Gui pay attention to is in the palace. Han nodded and said, in the afternoon, I received news from the royal guards that His Majesty has asked them to go out and catch tigers. Catching tigers. Catching tigers. All the people present were confused. What is the situation? Han Gong, isn't it a big deal for Your Majesty to send the royal guards to catch a few tigers? An official sitting at the bottom spoke cautiously. A few tigers is not a big deal, but what about 10,000? Han said indifferently. Hiss. Hiss. Everyone immediately took a breath of cold air, and the hissing sound kept coming and going. 10,000 tigers. How many people are there in the royal guards? Capturing 10,000 tigers, all the royal guards will be sent out, and it will take a long time to catch them, right? This kind of wasteful behavior is absolutely unacceptable. Officials shouted loudly. Absolutely not. Others also responded. Han Gong, Zhu Gong, as courtiers, we should advise you and not let Your Majesty act recklessly. There must be cunning and deceitful people deceiving Your Majesty. We courtiers must not sit idly by and let Your Majesty's reputation be damaged. We must eliminate these traitors and uphold the principles of justice. Yang Lian stood up and arched his hand, saying. Other officials have also expressed their righteous opinions, but the real reason is well known to everyone. After finally putting the vicious dog of the royal guards in a cage, how could it be so easy to release it? Your colleagues are right. There are loyal and upright officials like us in the court. How can we let that treacherous and corrupt person ruin Your Majesty's name? Tomorrow morning, in the court, we must advise and eliminate the treacherous and corrupt officials. Han looked at the crowd and spoke confidently. Dear old iron workers, we are looking for recommendation, collection, introduction, and quality, end of this chapter.